every upgrade is a breaking change because once you're 15 versions behind, you're 2 years past the expiration date. Turns out that's hard to do.
Yeah, I think a lot of people view like business end users as fickle, but I think it's more that they are demanding of success. Helping companies think about this stuff strategically, maybe before you get to 100, 200 use cases, because everyone starts in this use case tunnel vision where they just want to get a lot of stuff built. And then they get to the point where they're like, well, oh crap, we haven't thought about anything strategically on scaling Foundry and managing that complexity.
As a platform owner, right, having a magic switch where you can just say, hey, this is 10 times faster and then 10 times cheaper, whatever, right, or whatever X you put in there. It's of course my favorite topic, but this was a lot of hard work, of course. Basically, there are research papers that say that I think the 99% percentile of scanned data of Snowflake and Redshift, what was it? I don't know, 300 gig. And the median is 100 MB.
Doing your email could literally be an AIP logic that's just calling these functions that are installed in like an NPM package somewhere that have this natural language interface for Google Gmail, or Google Calendar or Google Drive. Then you just write the prompts, right? And you provide the required inputs.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Code and Connor podcast. My name is Connor Deeks, CEO of CodeStrap, and I'm joined, as always, with the original CodeStrap himself and CTO, Dorian Smiley. We're going to be bringing you guys the latest and greatest around Palantir, the tech, the company, the community. We'll also be discussing insights on other companies, things happening in the world of AI, of data, of consulting, of investing, and any meaningful topic that requires attention. The focus of today's episode is the Palantir developer experience and Foundry at scale. We're joined today by Nicolas Renkamp. Nicolas is the global head of platform product portfolio at Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany. He joined the company in 2019 and began working with the Palantir platform at that time. He is also deeply involved with Merck's deployment of AWS, Snowflake, and Fivetran. One of the most important voices in the Palantir ecosystem, he was deeply involved in the development of Foundry DevTools, allowing us to interact with the Foundry APIs and develop transforms locally. And in 2025, he worked with Palantir to bring lightweight transforms to the next level and to everyone in platform. Nicolas, welcome to Code and Connor.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Welcome. It's good to have you. Good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, Jerry.
Awesome.
Good to see you, Connor.
Well, the first topic on the docket is the story behind DevTools. We'd love to hear it from one of the men who was a core contributor and responsible for getting us that capability.
Yeah, I mean, we have to go back a little bit in time. In 2019, let's say the experience was a little bit different. I was joining the company, joining my team, a data science team as a machine learning engineer. And, we had Foundry as a platform, working together with all of those PhDs that, could write down the neural network without an AI assistant as today, Dorian. So kind of felt like an imposter there. But what I saw is that the iteration speed on Foundry was like, 10 minutes, or you make one line of code change. And I thought it's just a waste of talent, right? And also I was a little bit afraid, that they quit and just go somewhere else. So out of necessity, kind of, I thought, there must be a better way, right? You have a Jupyter notebook, you change a line, you press like 2 seconds, it's there, right? And that was basically the goal. And then got into like, how is Foundry actually built? What are the APIs, and started to internally, of course, kind of look into how the things work. And we implement like, how do you get data in? How do you get data out?
That reverse engineering process from the API layer, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, was it literally just open up DevTools? What is Foundry doing when I hit the preview button, or what is it doing when I hit the...
Yeah, so back in the days, there was a Foundry SQL server. No, there was a Foundry JDBC driver. There was actually just a wrapper around the data proxy API. And so the first version of DevTools was actually just using that JDBC driver and then hooking that up to the Transforms API and bring that back into Spark. So that was kind of slow and there was no caching and so on. But then sometime I realized, look, what is this JDBC driver doing? It's just a stupid wrapper on the REST API. So why don't you just call the REST API? And then, catalog and all of those other APIs coming together. And then the project, I think in 2020, 2021, was definitely adopted internal, and back then it was called Foundry Local. And then I think the developers were quite happy. It's actually still used today. It's actually, you don't have to use it today anymore, because the official, and that's where we probably can talk about, the official VS Code extension is much better now. So I'm happy that I don't have to maintain it anymore.
Everyone likes VS Code, and they do some vibe coding in there with like Claude and stuff. I think is a lot of kind of the setup the developers are into today, and performance is good. Like, I mean, the preview capability is good. We get pretty instant preview. Preview itself is still challenging, because preview is like, not all the features work in preview. Like if you're doing incremental, you can't really preview an incremental build effectively.
I mean, I still hit something yesterday where, like, when you want to use AIP models like GPT-5 or whatever as an input, it's not supported in preview, but they get to it. But yeah, back then we then thought like, hey, why don't we? I was talking to Francisco, you also know Dorian, right? Back then, and I thought, why don't we just open source this, right? Why not? And so yeah, so we did it. It was we had a few people from PD coming over, and then we were going through the code and looking like, is this okay? And what do we have to change, and so on. We just open sourced it. Well, I think some people are using it, not from my company, but I don't think it's like hugely adopted, but I actually don't know, right? I mean, maybe people use it. Maybe people look into how we call the APIs and so on. And recently we added an integration to the official SDK. So for my developers, for the people in my company, they can now just use the same context that they used to use. Just say, then give me the public SDK, and then, there's a way now. There's a way now to do it.
Yeah, the platform SDK has come a long way. And so that's enabling a lot of interesting workloads that we're building too. What's interesting though is you were the first person that I'm aware of that was looking at this developer experience problem and like ways to fix it. Palantir has gone through different iterations, like, and there's been times when they've been more focused on doing everything in platform and using Foundry native tooling, but it seems like now they have a separate track, which is also, how do we bring Foundry to all the tools the developers already use?
If PD would develop Foundry in Foundry, the developer experience would, maybe today they do it, I don't know, but with VS Code. But yeah, I'm quite happy. And I mean, I did a lot of poking. When you look at the developer experience today, at least, I'm not so much an expert in the ontology world, but in the transforms world, the only criticism I still have is that the checks still take too long. So they're still based on Gradle, but people have promised me that they're still working on improving that, and I trust those people. So this will take just some more time, but then if you can go to a build and have a result under a minute, I think then it's quite a thing people realize outside, like what experience do you have in Foundry compared to other tools, also with the branching. There's a missing item with the checks, but the previews are extremely fast now. So with lightweight, it's really 2-3 seconds now. It's but when VS Code launched, maybe 2 years or 1.5 years ago, it was still quite slow, quite bumpy, I would say. But now it's no more criticism. Even the AI capabilities are quite good.
And Connor, you know about this a lot, like the developer experience in Foundry, whether it's the citizen engineer or the code forward engineer, it becomes a problem, right? Like for adoption, like as we go to like scale this in an org, to your point earlier, Nicolas, you get people like, they're going to quit if we make them work in something that makes them angry or they can't do their job effectively. But I think, Connor, you've seen this too. And the improvements they've made around performance to address this.
Well, yeah, and when you're using Foundry and you're using 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 different microservices in the platform, your developer experience really matters. If you don't get some of these things addressed, users, developers, citizen engineers, or code forward developers, they almost always rebel. So now some of that you can overcome with training and making sure that they understand the user interfaces and the primitives of the platform. But a lot of that is, well, do we overcome this with more training and making sure that they only use Foundry, or do we actually focus on developer experience and making it better for them such that they want to adopt the platform and use Foundry local tools or Foundry native tools?
Yeah, one thing I now that you talk about it, that people want to, like the VS Code, how they build it now with a plugin that you can also run locally in your VS Code, exactly the same code path. This is quite clever, and this is quite seamless now. and just in time for the Claude Codes of the world and the AI development, right? Imagine they wouldn't have done this. I mean, I don't know. I mean, how would you write code in Foundry?
You would be really behind. I mean, yeah, that's actually, I never thought about that. Like, if they hadn't invested in this, one of the second and third order unintended consequences would be they would have missed AI coding, right? Which is now huge. Like, everyone is using it.
The legacy of code repo is quite a mess. So they had to get out, and building in there some AI capabilities would not yield a good result.
It's just crazy to think, though, that this should be a lesson for them, that like meeting developers where they are have unintended side effects, one of which might be that the trends that emerge in the future you can be part of. And so anything you do to kind of isolate yourself from widely adopted tools could actually be a strategy that when innovation happens and those tools become insanely more valuable, you kind of miss out, you know? So I think that putting developer experience at the center of everything you're building is super important, at least in the code forward parts of the platform. But what I'm interested in now is like how Foundry is becoming attractive for its differentiated capabilities. So not having just feature parity with what a developer might expect in VS Code, or being able to work in a containerized version of that and access AI tooling. It's things like branching and things like lightweight transforms that make it easy to switch between the type of either distributed or single node processing technology you want to use. And you can almost make the case that like now that those are things that aren't offered anywhere else, and so it can provide a better experience. But I'd be interested to get your take on like branching, and then on lightweight transforms, like how much is that changing the discussion with developers around Foundry?
Yeah, so let's maybe start with end-to-end branching. We were also an early adopter of the ontology. We have object types going back to 2018, which we just migrated to OSS v2. That's quite a long-living object type, right? So developing with confidence was always painful, right? Because you couldn't create branches. You also like could do some tricks to copy, to embed modules into modules. There were always ways to do stuff. Of course, when you are you can only do forward compatible changes and so on. But yeah, I mean, not everyone knows how to do stuff, right? So end-to-end branching in the ontology is a long-standing ask, at least 6 years ask. It's almost there, I would say. It's still in beta, and there are still some things that do not yet work, but it's also very complex to implement for all the different apps, and for a team to implement that has only that option to implement end-to-end branching. What I see and what we use, it's really, really cool, and it's definitely differentiated. I don't see it anywhere else. End-to-end from the, let's say, data lake layer to the application, to the logic, and back, right? Then making changes on a branch, reviewing it, merging it, and then doing that all at the same time with different features.
And testing it, right? Like you can come up with creative ways, which is neat. It's like, oh, my data team doesn't need to blow up my production system anymore. I was like, and that tended to be where a lot of the blowups would happen. To be like, I've got this app, it's running great, and I come in tomorrow and nothing's working. I'm like, what just happened? And it's like, oh, well, the data team, changed the pipeline logic and then changed the schemas, and now these things don't work anymore, or like whatever. Being able to see that ahead of time, connected all the way out to the end user who's using like the workshop application. And we've tried something like, I don't know if you've tried this, but we've tried some experimental versions of this where we try to do a canary release by creating separate working groups that use different Carbon workspaces. And then they could launch like a feature branch of the workshop application that's on this entire branch to stage a release, just rather than using like a dev and a prod.
I think branching is the sweet spot between this classical release management, where you can do it now with DevOps and Marketplace, but the feedback loop is extremely long, right? Because you need to package, you need to install, and then it gets to the business user and they say, hey, I don't want this color. And then, you just have to do the package and the install again, even though maybe it might be fast, right? And with branching, I think they might just change themselves, right?
It's just super quick. It's like you just take that feature branch and gradually roll it out through Carbon workspaces and let teams, hit it, and then just call out, just merge to master and re-update all the links back to the main. That could work. I'd love to see that automated one day, though, like a canary release management thing for when you do merge branches, like it doesn't go everywhere at once, and you could have the opportunity to roll it back. kind of similar to what we build for our container services and stuff. One of the things we tell a lot of customers, like, well, why do a lot of these large scale data integration initiatives fail? I think part of it is the stability of the changes, right? So like as you're integrating more and more data sources and, the risk is going up, and then you make changes to those things, your ability to effectively know if you broke something downstream, that inability to do that, Connor, I know you've seen this, is like, you'll get this negative feedback loop with the business where they'll lose confidence as churn ramps up and you're like breaking stuff all the time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people view business end users as fickle, but I think it's more that they are demanding of success. And when we do a lot of things in the world of data and then we do break something, particularly in an operational context, and then it takes us a long time to remediate and go through release management and all those things. Every minute that passes decays the confidence in the delivery of capability. When we talk about the ability to have end-to-end branching, be able to solve some of this stuff, we use canary release where we can like slowly roll things out to select users. That is a massive improvement in the delivery of capability to the business, such that if we can do it in that way and we can do it quickly, we'll instill massive amounts of confidence in our business end users that will then drive them to want more and more capability because they have more confidence that it's actually going to be delivered and it's actually going to be maintained. Now we've put up all these different release capabilities and maybe marketplace and DevOps. That's fine. But if we want to get to a future where we're rapidly iterating, getting out new features to our customers, we need this capability. So love that Palantir is investing in it. I agree with you, Nicolas. It's not quite there yet, but once it is, man, it's just going to be a big value unlock and a boost to end user confidence.
Talk a little bit too about lightweight transforms. This is something that I'm actually doing some hackathons at a customer right now to get everyone building in some lightweight transforms so they can apply it. But I saw the video you did with Chad and the gains, the efficiency gains you had. I think it's really fast. It's like ridiculously. Like a huge improvement.
As a platform owner, right, having a magic switch where you can just say, hey, this is 10 times faster and then 10 times cheaper, whatever, right, or whatever X you put in there. It's of course my favorite topic, but this was a lot of hard work, of course. I think the first initial version of Lightweight is already a few years old. I don't exactly remember when they introduced it, but we were also early testing it. Somehow they made a mistake in saying that they download all the inputs to the container first, and then you upload the results. And basically that was the wrong abstraction. And we also kept telling them that they need to use an object store as an abstraction to read and write the data. Because libraries like Polars or DuckDB or Data Fusion or whatever comes tomorrow, they have very efficient object store Parquet readers and writers that can run parallel requests, range requests, only request the data they need. So the transform is finished when the, let's say, old version was still downloading the Parquet files, right? So I was so happy when I heard that they are working on this new, let's say, S3 proxy as a Rust component that runs on the Lightweight in the same process. Just a very small thing that translates S3 to whatever proprietary Foundry file system is behind, right? Obviously, the files are then on S3, but then there's something in between for the decryption and encryption. And naturally I said hey, let's make that work with DuckDB, because we were very much at this technology and just stayed on the ball working with the dev from Palantir to get some, let's say, bindings together. There was also this open source library where you can transpile PySpark code to DuckDB SQL. So we can basically take the same code. Obviously, if it's extremely complicated, you need to see it's open source, right? So your mileage may vary. It uses SQL Glot. It's called SQL Frame. It uses SQL Glot. It's quite well maintained. Kind of hooking that up together to the S3 proxy and then rolling it out to a few users inside the company with let's say, most standardized compute. You always do the 600. You always do the same transformations to your SAP string columns, right? You replace an empty string with a null or something like this, basic stuff. But then you do it 1,000 times a day to 1,000 different data sets. And then the other one where you just combine union a lot of data and do a few things on the side. But essentially what you can heavily vectorize. And that was giving that boost. The coolest thing is that I think next week or sometime the official DuckDB bindings will be released, so everyone can then use it.
You'll save me a ton of time because like we have this dream of being able to make our transforms interoperate based on data set size, especially for the common transformations that we have to do. And then the other is like, we want to be able to kind of abstract away some of the implementation details around Foundry, and just, so we have a core set of libraries that may not know what they're running in. They just know that their dependencies get fulfilled, but it would let us standardize around Spark kind of as the API, which for us, we want to do.
It's actually very less code now. I was able to delete basically all of my code, just point to the official bindings now. And yeah, I mean, what are the good things about lightweight? You can freely decide how much CPU and memory you give your container. Or
That's right.
you can give it a lot of, but you can also give it very small amounts. So you can run containers with 0.1 CPU. We have so many jobs, right, with small data, with tiny data.
In the past, we would have to make this trade-off to decide like, well, if I build it in this processing type, the single node technology, if I ever have to turn it into a Spark pipeline or something, well, I got to rewrite a bunch of stuff, or depending on how I built it. But there's a bit of refactoring that would go around trying to turn that into something that could handle big data. But with SQL Frame, like, I mean, I know there are parts of the API that will break, right? But like, it's way less, and you have more optionality now. Like, oh, well, if this data did ever grow to be something massive and I need multiple nodes, I can still go back to Spark. And in theory, it's not a huge refactor.
A lot of the use cases that we tackle with customers are, I would say a majority of them are with very, very small data sets. And so if you can get the speed up on the data transformation layer, a lot of the objections, or when people like these other point solutions in the ETL world, kind of lose their shine when compared to like with the fact that in Foundry you get all of the capabilities that all work together. This was a sticking point with a lot of our customers, where they're like, why does it take so long to run a pipeline in Foundry for this minuscule amount of data? As we solve that issue, we again unblock the citizen developers as well and get them to more easily adopt the platform.
They have lightweight and pipeline builder too. It's also supported there. Yeah, that's their visual tool for pipelining, and it's again supported there as well.
I mean, obviously we get to see your conversation with Chad, the remarkable achievement you made with adopting lightweight transforms. What was that like inside your organization when you kind of showcased that? Was that like a holy crap moment, or was it just you giving yourself a quick high five that you just saved a bunch of time and money?
People were really asking like if this is too good to be true. The owners of those transforms, they basically wanted to use it and as soon as possible to get started to migrate workloads. And we are migrating whatever we can, whatever makes sense. I think once the official binding, once it's more stable, we will also try to make it a default. Actually, people have been asking me, hey, can we disallow Spark? Can we please disallow it? And then people need to ask, the admins or whatever, that they can use Spark. And I think it's actually a quite good idea. I'm pretty sure it's very hard today because Pipeline Builder, all of those use Spark. So taking away technically, it's probably not doable today, but definitely not impossible to ask Palantir to help us with.
We're going to show some code. This is like a notional example. This is not a working example, but the general idea of like being able to use DuckDB with lightweight and just being able to read the paths in to the stores and then, perform your transformations. I was attempting here to use SQL Frame to provide to use a single Spark API. But that's the idea, is that you could interoperate, right? Like you take Spark and make it your single API layer, switch between whether it's DuckDB or any other technology that SQL Frame supports.
It's similar to how it's for us as well. So you get a session and then you convert your inputs to SQL frames, and then you write your PySpark code, and then you just. So yeah, it's representative of the truth, Dorian.
Our customers, the big lever they can pull on here now is like reduce cost immediately, right? Like take that same PySpark code you had, use SQL Frame, pay at least half of the cost that you were before. That's just like everyone should go through that optimization journey. And to your point, Nicolas, maybe it's like disallow PySpark unless there's disallow Spark unless there's a reason,
Yeah, it's PySpark Spark's 0.1 version was 2014. DuckDB's 0.1 version was 2024. Basically, there are research papers that say that I think the 99% percentile of scanned data of Snowflake and Redshift, what was it? I don't know, 300 gig, and the median is 100 MB.
Related to this topic of like Palantir becoming more attractive developers is the optionality. This is one of them, right? Like you have this lightweight lever you can pull on. It gives you a ton of optionality. I think the other is like Foundry doesn't typically exist in isolation. I think, Nicolas, you and I were talking one day and you're like, I don't think people in the Palantir community necessarily know that in these large enterprises, they have every tool. It's not like just because they have Palantir, they don't have like Snowflake or Databricks, or often they have all of them somewhere in the organization. But the second part of this optionality is the multimodal data plane and like how you can connect these through open data formats. Is this something you're doing and something that you're excited about? Are you investing heavily in open data? And if so, like what formats?
We do use what they branded as MDMP a lot. We already, before that was a thing, did certain things that are now MDMP just on our own. So to push data to Snowflake or to ingest data from Snowflake in an efficient and fast way, also to BigQuery. But with the virtual tables, and it's become way easier. Everyone can do it now. And we have built up, a kind of raw layer underneath our platforms for all our ERP data based on Iceberg technology. And it is only possible because of those MDMP investments and the openness. Same for on the Snowflake side, they're embracing Iceberg a lot. And if that wouldn't have happened, this would not work out, this project. So we have essentially a layer for certain data sets in our company that is like 0 copy from Foundry, 0 copy from Snowflake, 0 copy from AWS. And that wouldn't have been possible, let's say, without the MDMP investments, at least for the Foundry connection. So
are they all using the same open data format, whether it's AWS, Snowflake?
Yeah.
Or that's also Iceberg. Yeah, that's awesome. That seems to be the de facto standard we're seeing as well. Like at most large enterprises, I think the most common thing we're seeing is Iceberg. If they're an AWS customer, you like Iceberg tables and S3, and then you'll have Snowflake, and then Foundry can sit out there as well, and then you'll do 0 copy. Do you have a data catalog implemented in AWS or Snowflake that Foundry also uses?
We do have a separate data catalog that is crawling like our data products from Foundry. We also have a data product in Foundry that we built ourselves based on the, let's say, meta ontology. Like every big stack, we have our own meta ontology. I wanted to say something about Iceberg, Connor and Dorian. So we also use it within Foundry, and I don't think many stacks are using it. And I think it's filling a huge gap when it comes to incremental transforms. So with Iceberg, you break free from the, let's say, append-only nature of incremental transforms, because you can, for the first time, rewrite the history and do a merge into. So you can rewrite old Parquet files, which was never possible in a first-class way. If you can partition your data correctly, this is also a huge time and resource saver.
How did you do that? Because when I asked Palantir a couple of years ago if they could configure Foundry to use an open data format, and add that metadata layer in Foundry for Foundry stuff that we're building and writing, it wasn't possible. Like there wasn't a way to do that. How did you get a hold of that feature, and how the rest of us do that?
So I think it's in beta now. I don't know the official answer. You reach out through your Palantir representative.
If it's in beta, I can enable it. I'll figure it out. I just didn't know it existed. It's awesome.
So the Iceberg spec just added encryption. And normally in Foundry, your files are double encrypted. So one from the hyperscaler, and then Foundry encrypts them as well and puts a key into the catalog. And with Iceberg, it's only this double encryption is not there yet. So we kind of had to acknowledge that. We are testing it. So maybe that's the reason why they didn't roll it out broadly. It's also still early, I have to be honest. Meeting every 4 weeks with the team, sharing the feedback. and they're making great progress on it. So yeah, and then you can think about it, right? When you have Iceberg tables instead of data sets, you can also query them with DuckDB. You can query them with Snowflake with zero copy as well. At the moment, we are copying, like, say, 2,000 data sets and on every change to Snowflake to have a query acceleration layer or to do other stuff in Snowflake. This probably can go away with Iceberg. That's really cool. Also with a partnership that was just announced between Palantir and Snowflake.
Kind of firing all cylinders, at least from a marketing perspective, but hopefully there's everything underneath the the marketing paper on that. We have the announcement with SAP, which they used to, at least from a legend's sake, they used to fight with SAP after they created HyperAuto. But then recently the Snowflake announcement, Databricks a few months ago, NVIDIA last week. They're just announcing these really strong partnerships with other technology companies. And when we hear from you and from others on the customer side that it's having meaningful impact with interoperability, which is critical for success.
There's one area of interoperability where you've been really active, Nicolas, and I appreciate the work you're doing, is on this idea of identity federation. And we want to see full interoperability, I think, in the future. I think where companies struggle today, if you're a chief data officer in a company, is that you get this governance sprawl because you have lots of different copies of data and none of the permissions pass through in these systems. So even if you're doing like a zero copy setup, you still have this problem of, well, what governs the access permissions, even if you're not copying the physical data around? And this concept of identity federation, where you could have one central data catalog, whether that lives in AWS or Foundry or Snowflake, that then the permissions would propagate from there. So like if you're accessing data, you're still going through this central data catalog. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, I know you're pushing for this. It's on the roadmap. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what you know.
Yeah. So theoretically, when you make a request from Foundry to Snowflake, Snowflake has a feature called external OAuth. So if Foundry would add the support, this would work. This query direction would work. You could open your virtual table and then Foundry will basically tell Snowflake who you are, and then you get your role level security from Snowflake. The other way around is, I don't think multipass has that features, but it's not undoable, right? So we use this partnership announcement as another angle for us to say, hey, this would be a true integration. So yeah, let's hope that people listen and build this stuff.
I'm going to do another first here. I'm going to share a community ticket, which Nicolas commented on yesterday. And I was like struggling with this because I'm at a customer right now and I'm trying to figure out where the permissions get terminated. And yeah, you commented there, so appreciate it. You're pretty active in the community. Yeah, you're on here quite a bit. You responded to a lot of my stuff, but are you on here every day? Yeah.
That's what I do in my free time, right? You can go to the leaderboard.
Oh, no way, really? You want to buy this? Are you up there? Like all time? Oh my god, there he is. You're number 2. Isn't Vincent at Palantir? Is that from Palantir?
Oh, no. Sorry for Wayne. Yeah, I sent you the bill, Dorian, for the question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
No, but it's actually it was a good question because they kind of made it sound like it's zero copy, but it's copying over. Of course, the copying over is super easy and probably efficient because they will do incremental for you without you knowing. But it's still, there's no other backend for the ontology than OSS v2, to my knowledge.
All right, so moving along, we talked a little bit about the NVIDIA partnership and the Snowflake partnership. One of the things I'm interested in is this, I don't know if you've looked at the NVIDIA partnership announcement, but they're essentially bringing like a lot of the hardware acceleration and capability that NVIDIA offers in its enterprise platform natively into Foundry. And supposedly those features are in there. I haven't had a chance since the announcement to go mess with them. The hardware acceleration specifically around optimization problems. So if you're working in like supply chain and you do a lot of mixed integer programming or linear programming, you have these like massive models, optimization models, they can take a long time to run and make maybe 8 hours, 10 hours, So the hardware acceleration is supposed to unlock more real-time decisioning in the supply chain. So you're not limited by the compute bottleneck. But is this something you've had to deal with where you're at? And do you see this as valuable for some of the problems you're trying to solve?
I don't have so many insights into this partnership. We do have a few GPUs on our stack, but we also have a huge AWS estate, right? We also have something on premise for high performance computing. I'm very much looking forward to have better capabilities in Foundry. Let's see.
You do have 100,000 daily builds, I heard, right? Is that true?
Yeah, it's I think the number was like even too low. It's 160,000. Yeah. So a lot of bills, a lot of jobs. Yeah. So
What's it like scaling up Foundry like that? I don't know anyone who has 160,000 daily builds. Do you have to build meta tooling for that? Like, is the meta tooling in Foundry sufficient for your stuff, or do you have to build your own?
pretty much every large stack like ours, when you talk to the people behind it, they all have the same kind of approach. You basically ingest all of the metadata into the ontology, like the bills, the jobs, resource management stuff, the schedules, the users, the groups, and then you build your own meta ontology and connect everything. And for us, the projects, of course, and for us, it's all around a governance object that we call use case. And then things are linked there. And then you attach people to, let's say, use cases that are owners. And then you basically try to evolve your platform. What we do to be not the police, right? When people do something that we don't want, we don't want to be the bad guys, right? As a, let's say, platform team or platform admin. So we kind of do this compliance checks, and then we say your use case is compliance or not. And then if it's not compliant, you might not be able to create access requests, or you might, we kind of penalize a little bit what you can do, but you can always get out of jail, right? You just fix your compliance and then you are back on track. And we have 3,000 use cases, right? So I have no time to talk to, like, it's better. And that's how we basically steer the whole ship.
That's amazing. Did your work with Foundry DevTools enable you to put that together? Because you have to do a lot of API orchestration, I imagine, to manage all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to keep it on GitHub, actually. I actually want to open source our orchestration for Foundry. It won't be as sophisticated what you guys have built, but I want a starter kit that people can use,
We are also now stuck in our legacy. We are stuck, right? We have our project Bootstrapper. We cannot use the Terraform now. It's okay, but you can enjoy the new stuff. That's also where I very much envy you.
I think that, and we try to tell customers this, like, I think because they're so new on the roadmap, they have it. What's funny is every customer has a parallel to this. It's their hyperscaler that they're building their infrastructure on. It's all orchestrated this way, and it's all monitored this way. I think that with Foundry, they just haven't thought about the need for that, because it's like they almost think of like a point solution sometimes, or they're just so early on in the journey. They only have half a dozen use cases, or maybe a couple dozen. That's fine when you're at that scale, but when you get into the hundreds, the sprawl becomes really, really hard to manage.
Yeah, I think at some point you need to introduce some rules.
Automation, it's got to be automated too.
Automation, yeah, exactly. It's got to automate the compliance, right? And then tell you when you are deviating. If you don't do that, you need an army of people running behind people that don't want to be ran behind because they want to build something.
Yep. Helping companies think about this stuff strategically, maybe before you get to 100, 200 use cases, because everyone starts in this use case tunnel vision where they just want to get a lot of stuff built. And then they get to the point where they're like, well, oh crap, we haven't thought about anything strategically on scaling Foundry and managing that complexity. And they'll go through cleanup exercises. A lot of times they'll have to pay external parties for that. And I think a lot of that can be avoided. We're working with one customer now that we're just almost begging them, please let us help you strategically to think about this. You don't have to build all the metadata tools and management capability away, but if you can think about this stuff earlier on, you're probably going to save a lot of money and manage that complexity far faster if you think about it today versus, waiting till the problem hits you in the face.
Yeah, unwinding it is always harder and more expensive than planning for it. And then, if you can walk in with a set of tools and capabilities that at least can help you manage the ontology effectively, like that's where I tend to see the first signs of this problem is like they get 500 objects. There's redundancy in a lot of them. No one knows who's governing them or like what permissions they should have, or, like, is this object even in use still? Can I get rid of it? Why is it sitting in this namespace? Like, where did this come from? So it's like, that's where I start to see the first signs of it. And I think that's where a lot of organizations should start to clean up their development process, to maybe think first about their ontology design as an enterprise. Not to have to say you have to do master data management, but when you design your use cases, maybe it's like taking the first step of using the tooling that's there, and that's like interfaces, for example, and shared property definitions. You could put some practices around like modeling things like, let's just say I'm in the insurance business and I want to have a claims object. Well, I could at least at a metadata layer describe the common attributes of what a claim should have in an interface, and then create shared properties and interface definitions that can then be applied in my use cases that are being built. Because that process becomes easier. Like, you could see this claim object that's used across all these ontology objects, then you at least know what the intent is there, and that they're talking about the same thing, and you can have some level of interoperability. So the need to consolidate objects becomes less. Because what drives the consolidation is typically interoperability. They want to be able to have this use case work with the same data that this use case is using. They don't have to like this. I got to go into Workshop and remap the object mapping necessarily.
I think you gotta hit the right point in time to do it, though. That's key, right? Because if you do it too early, you're not getting the value out of it. Once you've shown the value and people are hyped, right, then it's the right time to think about refactoring into a, like, say, core ontology that can be reused by multiple use cases, and then scale from there. So in one of our domains, we do have this central ontology built. It was quite an endeavor and built by very talented people from my company. And now it's paying off with AIP, right? It's paying off so much because of the core ontology being there for this domain. And then you can build so many processes around it and build satellites. And if this ontology wouldn't be there for them, all of those use cases would not work.
How do you approach governing that? We've kind of advocated a lot of times for there to be ontology product managers in certain parts of the business that can think about how these objects all fit together for a particular domain inside the business. But how do you manage that governance such that you can have a core ontology and it can give you those benefits of compounding value creation downstream? It's an area that's sort of still an open question, I think, for a lot of companies.
We do have those roles. They might have a different title than ontology manager or something, but it's a hard problem. So if your ontology is too big, right, you have too many interactions to come to a conclusion. So you need to find the sweet spot of complexity and people you can align with to agree on a final version of the data model, and build it like the dream of having one ontology for the whole company. I don't know. I've not seen it with us. I've not seen it with others. At least the people I talk to. But having strong domain ontology is definitely something doable. And then you need someone that really understands how, well, in our case, the legacy systems, how they work together, how the data flows from A to B. And then you basically build an abstraction on top that's a better version of the past. So you decouple yourself from the systems that are hard to change because they don't have branching. They don't have, you cannot make changes with confidence. You need to go through, dev, test, QA, prod. It's like 6 months or a year to change a single thing. Those processes exist in every company, and it's natural because those systems are, let's say, mission critical. If the system goes down, the money is not coming in. And I think with ontology, you can break free with that and rebuild stuff over time. And for me, that connects us also to the SAP topic, right?
I don't think any type of company of current scale has created an enterprise-wide ontology and is, well, actually, let me take that back. Thomas Cavanaugh came on. It sounds like they're doing it pretty quick in the construction arena. But for startups, we've seen companies that are built from a Foundry first stance, and they are creating their enterprise ontology. And there is no other piece of technology in the stack that's causing complexity. So
yeah, they don't have an ERP, right?
It's kind of like you said earlier. It's like you get to start fresh. Sometimes greenfield is easier than trying to do the integration post. It's also orders of magnitude.
The tooling is better. It just works better, and the changes you can do with confidence is it's totally different ballpark.
Yeah, we were talking about this with Sigma IQ last week too, about this idea that like Foundry can be this bridge. ERP systems are hard to replace. They're going to stay around for a long time. That doesn't mean that you want to continue to build the future of the company on top of them. They're very inflexible. They lack core capabilities like you just mentioned. Like they can't do branching. They're not like a fully integrated platform that's going to let you build modern, operational applications and take advantage of AI and all these things. But Foundry is this great sort of bridge between those things. And it allows you to continue to run these systems that the financials depend on, or core parts of the reporting depend on, but then build these new capabilities in Foundry and orchestrate these things together. So cool. And like, I love that's the way are kind of thinking about how you leverage Foundry. But one question I have is like, that becomes hard at scale. Like, and you're doing this at scale. And the reason it becomes hard at scale is some of the same governance issues creep in. Dwayne at Sigma IQ, he used to work in the ERP industry, and explained like when ERP started, they weren't this like rigid, crappy thing, but then all of these compliance regimes came around them due to like Sarbanes-Oxley and all this other stuff that they just became this giant risk management platform.
You might do a foreshadowing here, Dorian. You might do a foreshadowing for 10 years or 20 years.
How do we stop it? How do we keep things moving efficiently?
The more mission critical stuff moves in, right?
Do you experiment with any different kinds of operating models to see what works for teams? Like, let's imagine you have your domain ontologies that are sort of the platforms they can build on in Foundry. How do you enable the teams inside your organization to then create things effectively? Is it are they small teams that can build a use case and they don't need a ton of governance? Or
there are different kind of, let's say, personas and teams that work with Foundry. So first of all, we have, let's say, the hubs. That's for each business sector. We have data hubs, right? That are strong teams that have experts, and they have data product experts and data stewards and data engineers and architects. In the ideal world, they own and develop further the ontology, the strategic data products that are like core for bringing the business forward. And then you have spokes, so strong teams directly in the business. So not in the hub, but somewhere, but they have, technical people, tech people that learned Foundry, or we have a lot of scientists in the company, right? So it's not hard to pick up if you do a good training. And they can build independently. They can reuse the data products. They can reuse the ontology, but they can also build their own workflows on top. And they can pretty much, as long as they follow the rules, they can pretty much do whatever they want. We trust them that they will do what is best for what they need to solve day to day. I'm trusting them. If not, then they would not use the platform. They would just use something else, or they would do something else. I don't know. People just use it for fun. I mean, maybe some people do, but
are all of the rules encoded into Foundry through your orchestration and governance systems you built, or are there also manual things that still have to happen?
We'll have to get better at certain things. Speaking of audits and, tighter and more mission critical stuff. But we try to automate those checks, and we try to use AIP to look into the projects and do they use AI or not. We don't need to use a human. We can just look at what imports they use in Python. So it's quite easy, right? If there's LLM in the resource management export.
This kind of management structure you're describing parallels a lot of the work that was done at tech companies like Google. Like Google has its own mono repo that holds the whole code base basically. And there were teams that would do nothing but build this automation tooling that go around finding anti-patterns in the software, making sure there's appropriate test coverage, like making sure the build systems work and are hooked up correctly. And there's two guys, Hiram Wright and Titus Winters, who wrote like a book called Lessons Learned from Software Engineering at Google. They had a lot of the same principles here. It's like you need to automate outcomes. You can't, at a company this size with this much code, if you're trying to rely on a process doc or a coding style guide or, some design patterns that you document in Jira, it's just not going to happen, and if you can't automate it, don't even write it down because you just wasted time, And so I think it parallels a little bit the challenges that platform engineers have had to tackle at some of these tech companies, but you're just building it in Foundry. It's a different set of tools, but it's actually the same technology if you get down to it. A lot of this, if you're doing static code analysis in Foundry, is the same if you're doing static code analysis in any other Git repository. Checking test coverage, ensuring CI/CD pipelines work correctly, looking at that security and access controls and governance permissions. Might be different APIs you're orchestrating, but like a lot of the stuff is the same at the end of the day. Which means that every organization should have I think at the end of the day, there has to be some group that's in charge of Foundry as a platform to do this.
There's also a lot of, like, let's say, maintenance tasks you need to do because things get deprecated, things change. And if there's no, if you're not acting on those, you will be in a bad spot later. Of course, you can keep ignoring it for a long time, but at some point you're in a bad spot.
Well, we see a lot of companies throw the least qualified resources and the cheapest possible cost on maintenance when some of these things are required to keep production workloads running or taking advantage of new and newer features in platform. So I think that's the worst thing you could do, by the way, for anyone listening, is yes, maintaining a solution can be a low cost center area, but as far as keeping up with platform advancements, that's got to be people that are experienced in platform. And then Dorian, you're always talking about, platform automation and platform teams.
I'm obsessed with it, actually. Like, I don't want the maintenance to have to be a manual thing. Like, for the maintenance in Foundry, like in code repositories, is making sure you're keeping up to date with the pull requests that are updating dependencies and applying security patches and like that sort of thing. I'm obsessed with trying to find ways to orchestrate that so that I don't have to sit there and approve, the pull request and like sit there and merge it. Now, sometimes that can be challenging because dependencies break things. And so like if you upgrade in a repository and the dependencies blow it up, you need an engineer there to fix it. But in most cases, like that doesn't happen. But then what happens is you start to get backlogged on those because you're relying on a person to merge them. Well, then all of a sudden, every upgrade is a breaking change because once you're 15 versions behind, you're 2 years past the expiration date. Turns out that's hard to do, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
by building automation, you can have the cadence such that the edge case, the breaking change is the edge case and not the norm. And like so, I'm obsessed with that part of it. I think that the other areas around platform maintenance that, are a little bit trickier because as a developer, you need to know more about the internals of Foundry. So if you're working in things like Pipeline Builder or you're working in Workshop, like there may be ways to orchestrate things such that you can make sure things stay up to date, but you probably need to know a lot more about how the internals in the platform work. And so but that's where you have a massive advantage. So if you share that knowledge with the world, it helps people like me, solve some of these gaps.
I'm trying. Just look at the Foundry DevTools repository. You'll find some sweet hidden gems. But yeah, talking about automation, right? It's out of necessity because I want to spend time on making sure the new stuff is adopted or the new stuff that is built is going in the right direction for us. So I need some time for that to kind of do my job, to convince people to build the right thing for us, and I don't have time to, I don't know, think about the Python 3.8 deprecation or the whatever comes tomorrow.
Yeah, you got more high value problems to work on. And I think AI is helping here too. I'm interested in AI FDE in Foundry for some of these reasons, to the extent it can actually help automate a lot of the stuff that I don't want people in there doing. And what's interesting about it to me is like what tooling they might be building under the hood. Like I know they have one of the things AI unlocked for them and why the platform SDK is getting traction and they're investing in it is this ability to use AI and platform effectively if you can effectively orchestrate everything really well. And so I'm interested what comes out of AI FDE that's not just the shiny part, like, oh, look, this thing built an ontology or modeled the source data, but also like the lower level stuff of orchestration. And maybe we get in between the standard automation, which might be the SDK or the API that you call and you can do stuff with. There's this intermediary layer of agents that become intelligent and domain in Foundry, like working with code repositories or working with Workshop or working with Pipeline Builder, where you get this layer of specialization in the SDK around AI that can orchestrate parts of the platform for you. The thing I'm looking at right now is like, what if we built a natural language layer to do that, right? So you could like have an agent that is building something in Foundry like a data model, but it works with these like specialized lower level agents that are built around orchestrating the platform effectively.
Yeah, isn't that a little bit the idea of the MCP server? At least the connectivity tissue.
You said a bad word here, MCP. We consider MCP a bad word. I'm not a fan of the protocol. I don't think we need a protocol. I think what we really need is a natural language layer. That's a package, not a protocol. And the way tool calling works in MCP is highly inefficient. Turns out these models are actually better at writing the raw source code.
But that is the key point I wanted to make, writing raw source code, right? And that I think speaks against AI FTE orchestrating, let's say Pipeline Builder or those tools, because those are Palantir specific stuff. Claude Sonnet 4.5 was never trained on a DSL from Pipeline Builder and I think Palantir has realized that and said, hey, if AI should work, we'll need AI first tools, so APIs.
It gets back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, where like if they hadn't invested in building developer tooling, you wouldn't be able to use AI at all in Foundry today for the development side. You're kind of hinting at this out of sample distribution problem for the models, which is like, they don't know the DSL for Pipeline Builder, therefore they can't be used to automate that. There may be a day when all visual pipelining tools go away and you just use language to pipeline things if you can make models that good.
Yeah, or if pictures will also be much better supported.
But there's a couple counter arguments in there. I think one is you can train domain specific models on these things yourself. So if they invest in trying to build their own programming models that are experts in the DSL, and that's all they know, and can translate requirements like tasks into things they can do with the DSL, that is possible. We experiment with that a lot. And we actually believe that like it's more of a symbolic approach. The DSLs themselves are complicated. So like we base a lot of stuff on state machines. Instead of the state machine language XState, which is one of these big DSLs that would be equivalent to something you'd see in Pipeline Builder or Workshop, instead of using that, because it's so verbose and there's so many ways to achieve the same kind of outcome you might want, we created our own kind of optimized version of that simplifies things for the model. So it like just gets rid of all of the noise, all of the excess tokens, all of the kind of problems around using that really complicated DSL. And we really draw a boundary on what should this model be able to do to engineer a solution with this DSL. It's not everything. It's just a subset of what's possible. And you could kind of look at this problem for Foundry in the same way. Like if you have and we represent this as JSON, our DSL is a JSON structure. But if you actually train your own models on these really limited JSON models and you draw a circle around the most valuable problems you want to solve, not everything, you don't want to take every capability in Pipeline Builder necessarily or Workshop and try and solve it this way. But the really big ones, that everyone needs, and you kind of look at that as a better starting point, as an accelerator. That's how we're making progress. And I actually think it benefits Palantir at the end of the day if they take that approach for platform orchestration, because the challenge with programming, like if I'm starting the layer below and writing the source code and not the DSL, is there's so many challenges with like deploying it and getting it into production and all these other things that aren't part of the source code generation. They're just totally outside the source code realm. And that's where Foundry has this like massive advantage as a platform for AI.
That also creates like a massive lock-in, right? If you have all your company's logic in a specific DSL, right? I'd rather have it in SQL Frame or Iceberg or Polars or SQL code, right? Imagine we would have all the code, all the pipelines in Mesa. I don't know if you remember Mesa, but it was a Palantir-owned kind of abstraction on top of Spark. We moved away from it to PySpark in, let's say, already in 2020. But imagine you have all your code in there and then DuckDB or SQL Frame comes down and you're like, oh, sorry, I cannot use it. So definitely there was a good decision to go with an open source, let's say DSL, to write the core logic.
Yeah, no, I agree. We've invested in something similar we call Foundry Developer Foundations. It's our attempt to provide some of the same abstractions you've built, but not in the data engineering layer, in the actual application logic layer. In Foundry, you've got compute modules, which let you run Docker containers, and you can program those in Python or TypeScript or I think Java as well. And instead, like the normal route for business logic might be one to use the visual capabilities of Workshop to try and transform objects and build the interactions you want. It could be functions. In Foundry, you have functions repositories or like code repositories where you can write, think of it as like little helper functions to help this thing along. It can get really complicated. You can interact with Foundry APIs behind the scenes. But to your point, those are still locked into Foundry. Like there's no use case for the code without a lot of refactoring and taking out all the Foundry specific implementation details that are in code repositories. So we thought of Foundry Developer Foundations as like, what if you could just write business logic as a developer and you didn't even know it was in Foundry? Like it's just all your native tooling. There's no need to know anything about how Foundry works at all. And that's how we built it. The way it gets deployed is there's one file or there's two files in the repo that package up a series of functions into a compute module and provide the interface bindings so that Foundry knows how to work with it and it can be deployed. But everything else underneath that layer is all just pure TypeScript, Node.js. And where we do touch Foundry APIs, we use dependency injection around that so that if I ever wanted to swap out the backend where it's touching Foundry and interacting with Foundry, I could easily do that in one layer as opposed to like having to go through, you could be in a functions repository. Imagine if you had to go through every file and remove Foundry APIs out of those files. It would just be nightmarish, So that's how we approached it. But I agree with you. I think that there are challenges around this. I think, Connor, I told you one day, I was like, it might be one day that like vibe coded apps, you could build them faster than in Workshop. Like if you were sitting down vibe coding a React app one day and like you could do that quicker.
I just saw a demo today where they vibe coded a Workshop widget. So it's coming.
That's been an ask for a long time, man. I think someone at 10x Partners did probably tried to shame Palantir into building this. I think ex-Palantirian was showing how he had built this prototype of like a vibe coded thing in Workshop, because Workshop under the hood is just JSON. Like there's a lot of it.
That demo,
It's a lot of JSON.
That's
Yeah. Did you see that? I think that was from 10x Partners that did that. And I had told Foundry this, I don't even remember, a long time ago when Ivy was working with us at the previous place, Connor, about how they could like use AI to code out those JSON structures inside Workshop. You need some specialized training. You probably need to reduce the surface area of the JSON to make it effective, but it would just be such a speed up. So I think a lot of developers had spotted that kind of early on and were like, man, if you solve this for Workshop, because it is such a widely adopted tool in the stack, and it's where all the application logic kind of gets built and where all the business users wind up. Oh my God, it's a huge value unlock because we have so many teams that are just sitting in there all day.
We always talk, a lot of clients want to get to like self-service capability. Well, if we get to self-service capability on an operational application level, if we can get that down to like language where you're constructing the thing you want and you're iterating really quickly, not just form and like what it looks like and how you interact with it, but like composing the actual functionality of it, holy crap, would that be a value unlock and a massive boost to adoption by different business units.
What you just described is easier to do in Foundry, despite the out-of-sample distribution problem of the DSL. It's so much easier to do in Foundry because the ontology is a abstraction for Workshop that already does the hard parts of that. So the API integrations and the write back capabilities, the CRUD layer, that all lives in the ontology. So like if you want an app that actually does something, where you do this in React, for example, the model's got to write all that code too. It's got to write all of the CRUD operations, all the API calls, all the queries. It's got to write that code somewhere, But with the ontology in Workshop, being able to get to a point where the business user could code a functional app is that the actual complexity is way lower if it's built on an ontology that solves all those other problems, because system integration, orchestration, API calling, that's where all the friction comes in and like apps tend to break. It's not in just building a pretty UI, and then deploying it all, right? Like deployment, monitoring, login, security, these are all things that Foundry also enables really easily. So like getting to that layer of a purely vibe coded app that works and you can manage it at scale, I think Palantir can solve that problem if they invest in it much, much better than, Cursor or any of these other, vibe coding platforms will solve it. I think. We'll see.
Would certainly help me to finally learn Workshop.
You don't use Workshop? Oh my God, really? Oh my God. I love it. You got 160,000 daily builds. You're one of the largest Foundry deployments in the world, but Nicolas doesn't use Workshop.
I'm really, really bad at it.
It's hard to use. On some level, it's whenever I have to go back in it and I haven't used it for a while, I start to get really I get a bunch of anxiety. I'm just like, oh no. What about AI? Just before we break, AI, we've been kind of circling around it, but like I know that in Europe it can be a little bit more challenging than in the US in some cases to deploy production use cases. Job displacement's probably a bigger thing to worry about. You have different laws governing how jobs get displaced. How are you thinking about this problem? Like is AI the primary thing that you're looking for value creation in the next 5 years, or is it more something that's further out when you think about leveraging it across Foundry and in the business?
So I think the notion that sometimes there's the notion you cannot do AI in Europe, right? Which I think is definitely not true. I think there are some rules that you need to follow, and Foundry helps us to have it easier to follow those rules, right? We have a use case catalog. You can assign an AI governance app to it, to a use case. You can make an assessment. You ask the right questions according to the EU AI Act. It's not rocket science. And then you're compliant. Obviously, there are certain things you are not allowed to do, or where you need to maybe consult with someone. I'm not a lawyer, right? So I cannot talk about the specifics there. And then you do it, right? Of course, it's still harder to do than in the US, maybe where there are no rules, or I don't know what rules.
There's almost like 50 different rule books now because the states are all adopting these like crazy AI laws. And so now we have like 50, we're in the same boat.
So I think where Europe is behind is definitely, I think, the frontier models, right? It's a big topic nowadays, right? I mean, with NVIDIA and OpenAI and the money going around, definitely ahead there. Let's see how long that goes, but we are happy to use those models. Also here in Europe, I would say I see a lot of great use cases being built, and they are definitely not to displace any people or what you said. So it's great because they can spend time on more valuable things. Like, who wants to send like thousands of emails to suppliers and wait for the response and then put it into databases? I think those are the let's say, when we talk about LLM, when we say AI like A equals LLMs, right? Those will be the value unlocked from LLMs. Unstructured data to structured, and then maybe the other way around.
You are preaching our message. We tell this to customers all the time.
And that's where we as a platform, we are trying to help our use cases, right? By making that connect easy. And I think if you don't do that as a company, you will fall behind, because you will send an email and there will be not a person replying to your email, for sure. I'm sure about that. That is definitely happening.
We're on that path right now. Connor says that email. So am I, because like we get, I don't know how many a day now, but yeah, if I could just get rid of the email, I'd have another hour to code every day, at least. And it would be a huge value. And then there's scheduling on top of that too, where it's like trying to manage your calendar every day. Like that can totally be automated. And things like invoice processing and places where you have to take like a unstructured input and put it into a form somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of jobs. Like that's why we've generally advocated for this idea of like a natural language wrapper, like interface for the global API economy. If you actually had a natural language interface that could interact with every API you use today that's backing a GUI, right? Like imagine there was an agent for that. You could rapidly assemble use cases in a really modular way around those same platforms, right? So like doing your email could literally be an AIP logic that's just calling these functions that are installed in like an NPM package somewhere that have this natural language interface for Google Gmail, or Google Calendar or Google Drive. Then you just write the prompts, right? And you provide the required inputs.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that you might need someone technical to build this, like yourself, right? But once it's being built, right, you can actually give it to the actual business process owner, and he becomes the owner of the agent. And he can go into the logic, and he can change the prompts, and that's the power of AIP, I guess.
You don't need MCP for that. It's just it's a 4-letter word around here.
I think with a lot of like the unstructured data structured, and like if you think about copilots and things that are native to Microsoft or Google, like why aren't those things really scaling? It's because if we take the invoice example, we're talking to vendors, you don't have any of the context of the actual business process or the systems like Coupa or procurement software. elsewhere.
What if you have already decoupled this into a higher level system, just like we talked about before, right? Then you could have that context, right?
With Foundry, you can bring that stuff together, and then if you can bring the unstructured data and then orchestrate through email, now we're actually talking about reducing the communication overhead of entire organizations, which if you think about everybody, Dorian mentioned 1 hour in email. I have to spend much longer. A lot of people spend their entire day orchestrating communication, which is really just moving data from here to there. It's just the biggest, it could be one of the biggest value unlocks for every major enterprise on the planet. But you have to have that higher level of capability to bring all your data into one place.
As a techie, it hurts a little bit, right? Because why don't we just build an API and settle on a contract? And then instead of you sending me an email for the order, you just call my API, right? That hurts, right? But it's just the reality. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
People have been saying this for 20 years. Like, why don't, or not maybe 20, but like 15, like there's an API. Just send me a structured request so that we don't have to go through this intermediary over here that delays everything. No one ever does it. And it's funny. I've been like, for years, I've hated email. I've always been like advocating email must die. Like we have to kill this 90s technology that sucks. But now I love it because so much business is done through email. It's becoming one of the biggest surface areas to extract value from for AI. So now I'm like, let email live forever. Like this is incredible. It's like one of the easiest platforms ever to launch a successful use case that has value for your enterprise. Just build it on top of email. And now Foundry has support for event triggers that where your emails, when they come in or things happen in your email system, can notify Foundry, use Automate to kick off your agents. And so you have this like wonderful closed loop system. So anyway, I've become a believer now. I love email again.
But yeah, I do think that speaking of email, right, it's something Palantir could do better. The integration into, I think it's something they should put 2-3 good people on, having a better SharePoint connector, having a better Office 365 connector that can read shared email inboxes and so on. We are building this all on our own, which is fine, right? It's fun, but I'm not sure everyone can do this. It's definitely a gap in the product. They should just, I don't know why they don't do it. It's a no-brainer because they're probably rebuilding it at every.
Well, shame them into putting it in the platform. Open source that when it's done too, because
No, we'll sell it marketplace.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Automatically getting your Office 365 emails into the ontology. You can drop me a message.
Well, thanks, guys. Today we covered DevEx and Foundry and Nicolas's contributions to improving it for all of us, bringing lightweight transforms to the masses, the multimodal data plane, Foundry at scale in large enterprise, next steps for improvement, and we touched on AI adoption at the end there. Nicolas, thank you so much for your time, man. Thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me. Great discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, it was awesome, man. Great discussion. Always welcome back anytime.
Future episodes coming, more and more guests of partners, customers, content creators, Palantir, other tech companies, you name it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.